All right. Hello again, adventures, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are finally going to finish the new ranger options in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Yeah, we started out with the revised or the optional features for the ranger, mostly because the PHB rangers we've spoken of before was just really kind of broken and underpowered compared to the rest of the classes. So it needed these changes. All the other classes, the optional features are just kind of ways to make the class play a little differently. And then I just wanted to finish off the ranger stuff all at one time. So, let's actually just dive into this last one. Now, we are going to be covering the Swarmkeeper, which I do remember actually seeing in Unearthed Arcana. I don't think I covered it. I could look it up because I have my computer right here. But it most definitely was an Unearthed Arcana. Um, yeah, it looks like I did the Fey Wanderer forever ago, back when I had my old chair. But no, I don't think I did the Swarm Keepers, at least not that I can see. So yeah. Um, so again, like I said before, the vast majority of the new subclasses in Tasha's are um, subclasses that have appeared in Unearthed Arcana and have now been put into their final form. And that's the purpose of Unearthed Arcana, is to playtest and get out ideas out that they're there so they can publish them. However, as we saw last week, that the Fey Wanderer, generally the version in Unearthed Arcana, at least from what I've seen thus far, there's a pretty decent change when it actually gets to a published book, which is good. That's how it should be. That's the whole point of it. And so I don't really feel bad about covering ones that I've done before, because this is a new version of them, and even if the changes are minor, they're generally big enough that it's going to make playing them differently, and therefore the strategy behind you using all the abilities is going to be tweaked a little bit. So let's actually just dive into the features right away. So at the third level, you get to two different things. As with every Ranger subclass post Xanathars, you do get Swarmkeeper Magic. It's listed as a second in the actual thing, but I'm going to talk about it for first because it's something that happens with every single Ranger subclass now. And this one's a little bit different than a lot because it gives you a cantrip in addition to your extra spells. Um, the Swarmkeeper Magic gives you access to the Mage Hand cantrip, which is not rangers in general are not able to use cantrips unless you take the Druidic Warrior fighting style. So having access to another cantrip is always this interesting. This one is even more interesting because when you cast Mage Hand, instead of you creating this ghostly hand that you can use to pick up stuff, it takes the form of your swarming nature spirits, which we will talk about in just a second here. But it does actually give guidance on the flavor of the spell instead of just the spell itself, and I like that. before any of the actual features of the subclass are discussed, they actually have a little sidebar called "It's Your Swarm," which talks about how you can color all of your spell casting to be kind of based on your swarm, and flavor them to basically be your swarm actually doing things for you instead of you casting the spells. It doesn't change anything mechanically, but it does allow for the class to feel very unique, even compared to other rangers, and I like that. I like the idea that your subclass isn't just going to give you different abilities, but it's going to make you look different. It's going to make you do different things. Even the things that you share with another ranger, like the spells you can cast, are going to look different when they're cast by you than they are by maybe a beastmaster. So I love that stuff. I think it's really cool, and it's something I think everyone should take advantage of. In addition to that, just like the other ones, at 3rd, 5th, 9th, 13th, and 17th level, you get access to an additional spell. The 3rd level one, the one you get right at the 3rd level, is by far one of my favorite underutilized spells in 5th edition. It is Fairy Fire. And if you have access to Fairy Fire and you are not using Fairy Fire, you need to. It is a massively useful spell. As long as they fail their save, they have you have advantage on all the attacks against them, and they can't turn invisible. Invisible enemies are a really good thing to start throwing at like mid tier 2 and into tier 3 parties, because it changes everything about how you play the characters, and how you do combat. Fairy Fire is the perfect counter to an enemy that can turn invisible, or an enemy like an invisible stalker that's always invisible. Yeah. So use that. The other ones are not quite as interesting. You have Web, Gaseous Form, Arcane Eye, and then Insect Plague because of course. But I gotta say, Fairy Fire is my favorite of the Swarmkeeper spells. So the other thing that you get at the 3rd level is called Gathered Swarm. And this basically describes the swarm that you are a keeper of. I am not a fan of insects at all. They creep me out. I wouldn't go as far as to say I have a phobia of them, because that's an actual psychological condition. And I think people use the term way too freely when it doesn't actually rise to the level of an actual phobia. However, I am real close. Insects, I have changed plans because I saw insects and the things like that. Like, I'm really afraid of them. So my first thought of playing a ranger that constantly has this swarm around them, I mean, they did describe it. Until you die, the swarm remains in your space, crawling on you or flying and skittering within your space. That really creeps me out. However, they have a swarm appearance table, which makes this a little bit better for me, not nearly as creepy. Yes, the first one is swarming insects. You could have locusts or cockroaches or whatever creepy ass the thing. You have this image of a ranger going around with bugs all over him. Oh man, no. However, they have a lot of better things, at least in my opinion. Miniature twig blights, which is adorable. Little stick creatures all over you, not like stick insects, but little like bipedal stick creatures, maybe with wings going. Ooh, that's cool. Fluttering birds, not creepy at all. You could be the hummingbird Swarmkeeper. That would be super badass. And the last one the list here is Playful Pixies. Which, again, super cool. Totally fine with that. I should point out that these aren't actual insects or twig blights or anything like that. They are intangible nature spirits that have bonded themselves to you, and that's just the form that they take. So because of that, you really can turn this into anything you want. If you want to have little flower people all around you, or maybe little critters like chipmunks or something like that. Or sugar gliders. Sugar gliders would be such a cool swarm, wouldn't they? So they just sit there and they'd be like crawling and going, ooh, and then randomly they go, ha, and they fly at people. I mean, that would be awesome. So customize your swarm, make it yours. In addition to the fact that you have things that may or may not be super creepy crawling all over you, they actually let you do things. Once on each of your turns, which we talked about, this idea of on each of your turns versus once per turn. You can cause the swarm to assist you in one of the following ways immediately after you hit a creature with an attack. The targeted attack takes an extra d6 piercing damage from the swarm. The attack's target must succeed on a strength save against your spell save DC or be moved by the swarm up to 15 feet horizontally in the direction of your choice. You can't lift them up and drop them. I know that's what you guys were thinking. Or you are moved by the swarm 5 feet horizontally in the direction of your choice. So this adds a lot to this class. First of all, the D6 effectively works kind of as a poor man's hunter's mark, which is nice. Significantly better than favored foe, which I will continue to bring up every time I talk about the Tasha's Rangers because it was such a bad feature. But yeah, this allows you to just do extra damage, which is kind of the vanilla thing of this, is just here's some extra damage. Again, because it happens when you hit, I guess it could be argued. It says immediately after you hit a creature with the attack instead of as part of the attack, or it doesn't increase the damage of the attack at all. I think as you read it that way, I don't think this can work like a paladin's smite where you get a crit and then you add the smite on so you can add double the dice. This specifically says after you hit the attack, and it says the target takes a d6 piercing damage from this swarm. Not that it adds damage onto the attack. So I don't think this would be one of those things that you could just double with a crit, like you can with a paladin smite. But still, an extra d6 of damage every turn, as long as you hit something, is pretty darn good. The moving thing is a controlling thing. Again, I like controlling things. I think they're fun. I think that they're interesting. I think they make combat that much more tactical, especially since there isn't a limit to how many times you can use this between rests or anything like that. It's just once per turn. So this particular ranger can very easily become a really good controller on the battleground. In addition to that, you can move yourself. And the nice thing about this, I talk about opportunity attacks as a way to get your reaction and actually get extra actions for your side for action economy and manipulation. Opportunity attacks are not triggered on forced movement. When something else moves you, there is no opportunity attack. because of the phrasing of this, says you are moved by the swarm. And they've already talked about um, the swarm remains in your space, but it is not you. It is its own separate entity. So that means this movement doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. So if you're in a bad situation that you can't get away from, simply making a single attack and hitting can give you a little bit of space to get away and get to a safer spot. Especially useful for ranged bow hunters or bow rangers, because there will be situations where you get swarmed by enemies, because bow rangers can do serious damage when you combine sharpshooter with a really good magic bow. So if you do get swarmed, you can use this to get away from some of them. 5 feet generally isn't enough to get away from every single attacker if you're being swarmed, but it's enough that you should be able to survive. So all those really good, really interesting. And again, they give you choices. None of those are clearly the best choice in every single situation. So overall, I like that ability, and it really gives you a feeling that this swarm is going to be a major part of the subclass. Sometimes you see in Unearthed Arcana every so often, and a lot of times with custom classes, they'll introduce this as something in a subclass, and it just will never be featured again. It'll be never something that you use ever again as you get more and more different abilities. This one, you can just feel that you're always going to be using this the third level of ability. So going to 7th level, you get Writhing Tide. And this is another one that I think is just really interesting. As a bonus action, you gain a flying speed up to 10 feet and can hover. This effect lasts for 1 minute or until you're incapacitated. And you can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. So this is where we first start seeing our proficiency bonus-based abilities. And you get all the uses back when you get a long rest. Writhing Tide is really interesting. This one is especially useful for bow rangers. And the reason I say that is a bow ranger or any ranged character that can be in the air and can fly as they rain down destruction is in a significantly better place than someone that's on the ground, because any melee fighters will not be able to get to you as long as you're at least like 10 to 15 feet in the air. You're a sitting duck you're a sitting duck for ranged spellcasters, and generally, thank you, phone. Generally, most abilities that give you the ability to fly are spells or spell-like effects that require concentration. So the fact that this just lasts for a minute and getting shot isn't going to cause you to plummet to the earth, and you have a hover ability in it, this is an extremely useful thing. And when you think about it, I just think it's adorable to have this idea of these little pixies just like picking you up. I think that's great. As a melee dual wielding ranger, this is going to have less use for you, because your flying speed is only to 10 feet, whereas your walking speed is at least to 30. So you're probably not going to be using it a ton, unless it is to get around things like an enemy that's out of reach, or I could see melee rangers using this a ton outside of combat, just to get places they're not normally supposed to be able to get. So, yeah, awesome, cool. When you get to 11th level, you get what's called Mighty Swarm. And this really just buffs all the things you could do at level 3. The additional damage you can do once per turn is now a D8 instead of a D6, so that's nice. If a creature fails its saving throw against being moved by Gathering Swarm, you can also cause the swarm to knock the creature prone, which is a big deal, especially for melee rangers. For ranged rangers, prone is a bad condition because it gives you disadvantage on all your attacks. For melee characters in general, prone is a good thing. It gives you advantage on all your attacks against the creature as long as they're within 5 feet. And the creature has disadvantage on any attacks it makes. So if you need to run away from it for whatever reason, or an ally needs to run away from it, as long as it's prone, which will probably end once it gets its turn and can use half its movement to stand up, you can, it'll have disadvantage if it tries to make an opportunity to attack against you. So super, super useful. I think more so useful for melee than ranged rangers. But it's one of the things I like about this class is it gives you abilities that some tend to, or subclass at least, some tend to favor ranged bow rangers, and some tend to favor melee rangers, and I like that. The last thing you get is when you're moved by Gathering Swarm, it gives you half cover until the start of your next turn. Now, a lot of people don't know actually what half cover and the 3/4 cover does in the D&D. And I very rarely see DMs actually using this system. The system itself is actually really, really easy. A lot of people think it's a lot more complicated than it needs to be. No. If you have half cover, which means effectively half of your body is obscured from the target that is trying to attack you by something physical. It can't be obscured by, oh, you can't see my bottom half because it's invisible. No, half cover implies that you actually have something in between you and the target that would block things. It gives you a +2 to your AC. If you have the 3/4 cover, you get a +5 to your AC. This is a really, really big deal because a +2 to your AC is a pretty big increase in what you can and can't do. Or what can and can't hit you. A +5 is massive. So using cover and asking your DM, hey, I'm shooting from behind this wall or behind this really big rock. Can I have half cover or the 3/4 cover against that monster? Is a really great way to keep you from getting hit and using the rules that are already built into the game that nobody ever uses. However, this is effectively, if you hit it to the target with an attack, you can move 5 feet, which, again, is useful. But what's more useful is you get a +2 to AC anytime you do that. Yeah, you have to give up either a D8 damage or knocking the target prone. But especially for melee rangers, getting an extra 2 to your AC is massive. That can turn you, if you've got a good dexterity, and you're wearing something like studded leather, or you're wearing like Magic's studded leather, you can start getting up to the point where you have, with a +2, you can actually have higher than heavy or plate armor AC. Yeah, and especially if you have the dual wielder for feet, you can become pretty darn hard to hit. And again, there's no limit to how often you can do that. It's just once per turn on your turn. So effectively, as long as you're hitting, you can keep your AC up indefinitely as long as there's bad guys around. Really, really useful. I'm not saying it's not as useful for bow rangers, or it's not useful for bow rangers, but they just don't tend to get attacked nearly as often as melee characters simply because the enemies are closer to them. So, finally, when we get to 15th level, you get Swarming Dispersal. Effectively, when you take damage, you can use your reaction to give yourself resistance to that damage. Super useful. You've just halved the damage. And it specifically says when you take damage, you can give yourself resistance to that damage. It doesn't say you can give yourself resistance to a single damage type. It is that the damage. So if you're hit with spells that cause multiple types of damage, like Meteor Swarm, I think is what it's called, where it does both bludgeoning and fire damage, you just get to have all the damage, which is really nice. In addition to that, you vanish into your swarm and then teleport to an unoccupied space that you can see within the 30 feet of you, where you reappear with this as a swarm, and you can use this feature a number of times. You could do your proficiency bonus, get it back on a long rest. This is super useful. I think this is actually more useful for a bow ranger than it is a melee ranger, but by just a little bit. Mostly because since a bow ranger is already going to be pretty far, a lot of times when you're going to be using this ability as a bow ranger, you will be using it from a ranged attack. And if you are far enough away from the enemy that they're making ranged attacks, there's a good chance that you can see a space that the person making their attacks against you can't, and effectively teleport yourself out of the danger. And then once your turn comes around, you come back out, take your attacks again, and are almost not worse for wear at all. For melee rangers, still really useful, especially again if you're being attacked by melee attackers. A lot of times they'll have to use most of their movement to get up to you. If they only get one attack, especially once you're at 15 level, most monsters have multi-attack. They get one attack, they hit you, they do half the damage to you, and then you teleport the 30 feet away. When your turn comes back around, you're going to have plenty of movement to get back to them and wail, but there's a good chance they're not going to have enough movement to get back to you, and they're going to have to waste the rest of that multi-attack. So when you are using this, one thing you should be looking at is there a place on the map that I can move to that is going to remove their ability to attack me again, and therefore cause them to lose multiple attacks or anything like that. Overall, really cool, interesting feature. So, final thoughts on this as a subclass. I hate bugs. I really do. I think this subclass is really cool. This is one of the few subclasses I've seen that actually feels that it's not written specifically to help a melee ranger or a bow ranger. This feels like you can go both ways, which is how the Rangers is supposed to feel. Is it should feel like you can be melee, you can be ranged, and kind of switch between the two. There's an MMO called Neverwinter, which is was originally based on 4th edition D&D. They changed it, now it's based on 5th edition D&D. But they added the Hunter Ranger was one of the classes they added after the launch. And the defining feature of the class, every class has this defining feature you use using the tab button. Defining feature of the Ranger was you would switch between ranged attacks and dual-wielding melee attacks. That's what the Ranger is known for. And this subclass really feels like you could do that. At one point you're firing away, pure Legolas. You're firing away. Someone gets too close. You go shoo, 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 and just start going at them. Excuse me. Yeah, I know in 5th edition generally you will specialize either in ranged or melee, just because feats and things like that won't give you there's not a single feat that will help both of those abilities. But if you don't mind skipping out on maybe a few feats that might specialize you a little more, this could be a really easy kind of middle ground ranger that can excel in melee and can also excel in ranged combat without too much difficulty. So, yeah. Otherwise, that's all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Lets me know you liked it. It lets YouTube know you like it. And hopefully, they will let other people like it as well. Also, hit the subscribe button. I put out content right now. I'm trying for 3 times a week. Generally, it's at least 2. And with Tasha's and all this stuff in there, I'm putting out lots of content. So definitely hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of my uploads when I upload them at just strange times. Because sometimes, because of my mental health, I tend to do that. In the comments below, I would like to start a war. And by start a war, I mean, I want to know, when you play a ranger, when you think about a ranger, do you think about melee ranger, or do you think about range ranger? Do you think of a character way back, just firing off arrow after arrow after arrow, or do you think of a character dual wielding in there, just swords going 50 billion times a second? Which one of those do you see as your kind of default ranger? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye!